Well, good evening again. Thank you very much. We might make a start. There might be a few stragglers that might jump in shortly, but we want to try and keep to the time this evening, so I appreciate the lateness of the hour, but thank you so much to everyone for joining tonight. As I said earlier, for those who missed, my name's Corey Bella. I'm the General Manager of Independent Vets of Australia. We're delighted tonight to be able to bring you a webinar on a topic that really is something that's hotly discussed amongst many practices, and it's something that's being faced right across the country at the moment with the ongoing issue when it comes to staff retention and sort of recruitment processes and being able to retain your veterinarians to your practices, whether they be new graduates or existing practitioners already. I guess the ongoing challenge that you have as independently owned businesses, and how you are able to support your newly employed veterinarians, and I guess in general why there's a shortage of vets in the market. What's the background behind that? And I guess ultimately, how could you as a independently owned business help to try and address that? And it's, as I said, I know I've had this conversation with many people, and it's something that seems to have a very common theme, and it's it's a constant sort of struggle for many people to find really good quality vets, and then be able to keep them, which I think is the biggest one of the biggest parts of the problem. So I don't think there's necessarily a silver bullet to fix it, but we certainly hope to get some possible strategies at least tonight, and with our speaker this evening, who I think will be able to share some very valuable insights of what we potentially could do with that. So just a little bit of background for those who don't know us, so Independent Vets of Australia. So I know we have both IVA members and non-members on this evening's webinar. So for those who don't know us, so IVA, we're essentially a collective buying and management group, and we're owned by our veterinary practices. So members essentially are our bosses, in essence. And we come together to largely level off the playing field in many ways for those independents who are facing the day-to-day challenge of their business, competing against I guess the increasing presence of the corporately owned practices and the big box pet shops that they're competing against, and to be able to sort of stay competitive and still have a strong and profitable business. So IVA hopefully enable our members to at least get a better bite of the deal when it comes to how they can access their wholesale pricing, manufacturer pricings. We have a raft of arrangements with various sort of industry partners that enable you to work on various parts of your business that ultimately address different things that you require at different stages through your business, whether that be the things that you would use from a day-to-day perspective or just business management in general. Everyone has a different need and at a different time. This evening is just one example of a particular need. And I guess coming together as a group, as a collective group, like-minded individuals, to be able to sort of try and form together and I guess give leverage, back to the independent businesses to ultimately try and find a better deal for them to stay competitive in the market is ultimately what we're sort of trying to do. Certainly for those of you who don't know us, if you want any more information, you can certainly reach out to us. You can email our email address on info@independentvetsofaustralia.com.au, and yes, that is one big long word. Or reach out to us directly, and we'll be able to have a further chat about that. But for tonight, I want to introduce our speaker, Dr. Dave Nichols. Now, some of you, I'm sure, are aware of Dave and his work. For those of you that aren't, just a bit of background on him, just so you're aware. So Dave graduated in 1998 from Glasgow University Vet School. He worked in the UK and UK market for various practices, but one of the big ones was Park Vet Group. He worked there for several years and was in a sort of senior management position and continued to build their practice to quite a thriving business over the years that he was there. In 2006, he gained management qualifications and then ultimately moved into a sort of business consulting role. 2009, he made the ultimate move and come to Australia. And when he arrived here, he actually bought his first solely owned practice in Sydney. That grew to 3 practices over several years, where he managed those businesses throughout that time. And in 2016, he ultimately made a decision to move back to the UK. He sold his businesses in Sydney and then moved back to the UK, where he continued to work as a consultant and build his business across certainly the European market and then internationally. So Dave is a published author. He's got experience across several businesses. His business knowledge, and certainly within the veterinary space, is and continues to grow, and has been very successful at the time that he's run his businesses and to date, where he is now an international speaker, speaks across the US and certainly Europe and obviously here in Australia as well. So I'd like to thank Dave for his time tonight, and I'd like to welcome him to take over the controls, and I'll allow him to take the slides off me as soon as I can work out how to hand it over to him. So just give me 1 second while we share screens and change over.
All good. Good evening, everybody. How are you all? Thank you very much for coming on the call tonight. Can you see my screen? That's my first question. So hopefully you can see the slides there now. Corey, if give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, right. I can see your slides. I'm just going to hand over the hosting to you, Dave.
And you can hear me?
Yep.
I'm not sure that's always a benefit, so all good.
Okay, so I'll give you the
good. All right, so I've got the chat box open. I've got the slides. Let's just check the slides are actually going to move. There you go. You've got some slides moving there, and I can see you as well, Corey. So we're all good. I think we're all set. So everybody who's on the call, just listening, if you can hear me, Kelly, thank you very much. You can hear me. Anybody else out there, just ping in. Let me know if you can hear me also, and then we can get cracking with tonight's presentation. This is a topic that's so close to my heart, and I think if it's not close to your heart already, it's one that's going to get closer and closer and closer as we progress through the next 5 years, because there are some macro trends happening in the market where we're seeing it being challenging to hire vets, and that's been true. It was certainly true when I was in Australia running veterinary hospitals. It's true notably since I've come back to the UK. It wasn't true in the US maybe 5-6 years ago when I first started speaking there. I would ask people, are you struggling to hire people? And they would say, nope, it's really easy. Now they're screaming as loud as anybody else. So this is very much a macro trend that's happening, that we're just struggling to get vets into our practices. And there's some other reasons why I like to talk about this, and I'm interested in our next veterinary generation as well. And we'll expand upon those as we go through our session tonight. So if you've got any questions, before we get going, if you've got any questions, ping them in the chat box. Corey is very kindly going to be my moderator tonight. And so if he sees anything that's like a breakneck issue, then we can stop and we can deal with that. Otherwise, we'll probably hold the questions till we get to the end of the session. And I'll stay on the call for as long as you like to answer your questions. And even if they're not questions related to the topic, then I'll quite happily answer your questions. Okay. So let's crack on. And I won't talk too much about me, but really, why am I doing this? Why am I working in this space, and who am I? Well, look, as Corey said, I've been working in the veterinary space as a manager, as a leader for the last 15 years. I've been a vet for 20 of those, and I was head vet of an 18-doctor hospital where we largely employed new graduates. And I have to say, as much as the business looked to be doing well and having success, we weren't doing the best job we could have done by our graduates because we didn't really know what that looked like. We learn from the experience of others, from our first bosses, from what we see other leaders within the industry, and from outsider industries doing, and we do what we think is right. And if I reflect back on the early days of my career, I kind of cringe a little bit at the way that we used to manage people and lead people. And I think, that was not a sustainable way of doing it. So when I came to Australia, I was really focused on wanting to deliver a better experience for the graduates I was going to hire. And I always wanted to hire graduates. I love working with graduates. It's challenging. It's not always the most profitable of work. But I had great bosses, and I was very fortunate when I started out. And so it was always important to me that I wanted to give something back and help the next generation have the same sort of experience that I had. I felt like that would go a long way to building my practices brand, as it were, my own personal brand, by doing the right thing by the people following up in the chain afterwards. There's also the motivation for why I wrote my book, So You're Vet, Now What?, which I published last year, and that's a book for new graduate vets. It's 20 years. I should have called it Shit Somebody Should Have Told You on Day One Coming Out of Veterinary School, but they didn't. And that might have been a better, more snappy title. But it's a book that's distilled the lessons that I learned and wish somebody had told me earlier on in my career. Okay, so that's kind of why I'm passionate about the new graduate space, and also because from the business point of view, if we don't start looking after these people better, this problem's going to get worse, not better. Okay, so this is a quote I firmly believe in. The foundation of every state is the education of its youth. Okay, so our journey today, so what can you expect from this talk? Well, we're going to talk about broadly the labour market, what's going on in the labour market, and what are the trends, and what do we need to know about that? I always approach every problem with two questions. What's going on and why is it so? I think if you can answer those two questions in any challenging situation, then you can find a way through it. Okay, so we'll talk about then, all right, how do we solve this problem? Like, what things do we need to do as practices in order to improve the labour market? And then finally, a couple of tools for you to use that I think will make a big difference in your practice. Okay, so let's get into the meat of it and talk about this labour market. Now, this is a slight quote, sort of, it's an interpretation of a piece of work that's done by the survey company Gallup, the research company. And Gallup published this stuff every year, and I swear to goodness, the numbers do not change. Like, the needle never moves on this, and it's a survey of engagement. That is people who are going to show up and actually do, at the very least, meet their objectives in a way that is beneficial to your company. So, you've got people who show up to work and actually get the job done, but will bitch and moan all day and suck the life out of everybody. And you've got people who are lovely and will show up but don't get the work done. So, like, an engaged person is going to be somebody who can actually, do both, competent and engaged. Okay, so this was a survey of engagement, and 30% of people, this is not in veterinary businesses, by the way, this is just broadly in the job market, but 30% of people love working for you, are completely engaged. Half of them just show up for the paycheck, and 20% of them hate working for you. Now, mischievous question number one. Type in the chat box. It's kind of public, so maybe you don't want to name names, but just type a yes or a no. If you've got somebody in your business right now that's in that 20% category, they hate you, and they're in your business, type yes in that box right now. I will bet you there's everyone on this call knows the answer to that, and if they're honest, will type something in the chat box. Don't say who it is, that's mean, but just ping in the chat box and say, do you have somebody that is in that business in that 20%? Alternatively, do you have people, and are you confident you've got people who are in the 30%? Because that's really the zone that we want to do for. If we want to push people up, from that sort of, we're going to get rid of the 20%, so we're going to change the 50% into the 30%, right? So that's really our job as leaders, isn't it? So let's answer these questions as well then. Give me a sense of, if you were to post a job advert into wherever you post, whether it's Kookaburra or anywhere else, how long is it taking you to hire a veterinary surgeon right now? So I can share what I've been told from my audiences in the US and the UK, that largely speaking, it's taking at least 6 months, and there's approximately 12% of practices are not making a hire at all. Like, that position is not getting filled. That's data that is, and I say data, that's anecdotally. So I ask this question every talk I do on HR and performance, and it's taking an awful lot longer than it used to do. So we got 2 months, we got 3 months. That's awesome. Now, let me put the word experienced in there. So not a new graduate. Let's talk about experienced vets. Does that change things? So greater than 9 months from Alistair. It's painful, isn't it? 20 plus months. So yeah, longer, much longer. Okay. Now, let me ask you, maybe you don't have a sense of this, but what's your turnover rate, your staff turnover rate? So that is how long or how many people will you turn over? Like, what's your average amount of time that your vets will work for you? So this is another interesting metric just to have a handle on. And it can be a painful one. You know, I hear a lot. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, "Oh, how often's too often to advertise my job? Like, if I can't fill it and the job ad runs out after 6 weeks, I don't really want to post the new job ad because then it looks like I'm desperate for people, and maybe that hurts my brand." So people, you know, how quickly you turn your staff over, particularly in this market, is kind of a big deal, unless they're in the 20% that hate you. That's different. But new graduates, I can tell you their average amount of time they will spend in a practice from the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons data set, which is a good data set, published in 2013. It's that you hang on to a new graduate on average for about 15 months. Okay, on average. But there's some other scarier numbers that I'll share with you in a second, so don't sit comfortably in that number. So let's just check in the chat box there. So employed one vet for 4 years, now can't fill that position. First time tried to hire, so not really appropriate, fair enough. How long they stay depends on their age and life circumstances, absolutely true. 3 to 15 years, that's amazing, Ken, you're doing a good job. And then weeks to 4 years, like absolutely hiring somebody in and losing them after a few weeks, especially how hard it is to hire somebody at the minute, is an absolute killer. Unless, of course, they were just a bad hire, and then keeping them longer than those few weeks is the killer, right? So let me ask you a question. How many of you are considering hiring a new graduate within the next, let's say, 6 months? You can extend it to 12 months if you're right. Robert, is that a no, you're not going to hire a new graduate, or a different answer to that question? Okay, so no plans at the moment. Yes, need experience. I hear you. It's hard with new graduates. It takes longer to teach them. But some of you guys are going to be in a position where you don't have a choice. And it becomes harder and harder and harder. I hope by the end of this talk you'll have a thought about them. And if you want to extend that conversation, like, I'm happy to have a chat with any of you guys about, you know, like, I always aim to get a new graduate to profitability within 6 months. And I've got a very set, structured way that I do that. And it works without fail. So they don't have to bleed you dry for the first year. And they don't have to be a complete nightmare in your hands and a liability. Like, they are harder. There's no getting away from that. But there's ways you can reduce that impact. Anyhow, that's not so much the topic for today. But if you do want to talk about that, I am very available online. So, Okay, so let's talk about what's going on in this labor market then, okay? Because one of the things that we have, I think we've got, and tell me if any of these resonate for you, but there are a few things that we like to beat and blame for the current situation going on in the labor market. Okay, so if any of these things are your thing, then fess up, all right? So the first of them is we're hiring the wrong people into university. You know, they're too weak, they're too cerebral, they don't understand what it's like to work with clients. Robert's loving that one. So that's our number one. Let's not in any particular order, but that's the number one thing that we like to blame our current situation on. Okay. Number two, we like to blame millennials, don't we? Like all they want to do is be on their phone, take selfies. As soon as we say a harsh word or we ask them to do any heavy lifting or hard work, then they break because they're just not built of the same stuff we were, right? So that's number two. And then number three, because they're women and they all have babies, right? Okay. So, and I'm not telling you none of those things is true, but here's my issue with that. Like, number one, universities always hired smart people, and I'm not terribly convinced that there's a difference in that trend certainly not over the time frame that it's gotten harder to recruit. Okay, millennials have been around for a little while, and yes, they are challenging to manage. And that's a whole other webinar. I'm thinking about writing a book called Generation Vet to help people who are my generation and more senior communicate with the millennial generation. Okay, but feminization isn't a new trend. That's absolute BS. Like, it's an easy one we like to blame, but I graduated from a class that was 80% female. That trend has not really exacerbated in any meaningful way. So I am not buying it for a second that the feminization of our profession is what's driving this current trend. Okay, and the thing that I don't like about these areas, okay, they definitely have an impact. Okay, I'm not saying it's nothing to do with making it hard to hire vets in the veterinary industry. I'm saying it's harder. What's making it harder currently compared to 5 years ago? The problem I have with these issues are that they're all finger pointing blame exercises. And when you blame someone, you're effectively handing the power to be able to fix that problem. You're saying that exists somewhere else. And that's not a helpful thought. That's not a way that I would encourage anybody to think. Yes, I think it's true that sometimes the academic people we bring in are not suited to life in an exam room or struggle with communication. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying it's hard to communicate with millennials, and I'm not denying it's hard to work with maternity leave as a boss. But these are not if we say we can't handle that, we're definitely in trouble. Okay, I think there's actually two trends, and one of them's a little bit out of our control, so I'm not going to spend too much on that, and one of them's completely in our control. Okay, so the first one that's not in our control is we're just economically in a better place than we were five years, certainly 7-8 years ago when the GFC hit. You know, things went to hell in the handcart. Business wasn't as booming, and now we're in a better place. There are simply more people entering the market. You've got corporate practices aggressively targeting the same vets you want to be targeting, and all of this is an economic reality that is a big bit outside of your control. Okay, so that's one of the trends that's happening there. Simply, we're in a better economic state. Okay, the second one is, and this is completely within your control, is that for too long we have just been walking on these young people and treating them a little bit like doormats. There are many graduates come out of college who are not given the support, they're not given the training, they're not given the things that they expected coming into this situation, coming into their job, or the promises they're made when they're hired are not kept, or our leadership abilities just suck. So I interviewed somebody on my Blunt Dissection podcast yesterday who had this amazing phrase, and he was an RAF. He's basically the RAF senior training pilot. So he trains all of their pilots for deployment on the Typhoons and on the Tornadoes and the new Lightning F-35s. Like, he couldn't be a more senior pilot if he tried. Fascinating guy, and he had this amazing phrase, and he said, "We teach pilots to react, to respond, not react," which is a short way of saying we don't let the emotion get in the way of the rational thinking process. And a lot of times in practice, as bosses, we're actually guilty of letting that. We react, we don't respond. And of course, when you react and you're a Gen Xer or a baby boomer, and you react in front of a millennial, that's kind of an ugly mix. It's like chucking a match into some diesel fuel. So I think our leadership actually is a big part of the issue. We've just not looked after this resource well enough. And of course, now corporate medicine's come along and is claiming to do it so much better. And this resource is responding to that and is not responding to us so well. Okay. So I think the first thing we have to do is just be honest with ourselves and say, are we actually doing a good job? Not the good job that we would have expected when we left college. That is not a thought that's going to serve you. And this point was made really clear to me. I had a great conversation at London Vet Show with Robin Hargreaves, who was a former president of the BVA. And we were talking about the millennial challenge of managing millennials. And he told me this story of when he came out of college, his boss was effectively somebody who'd faced Hitler's bullets, okay, tough as nails, probably lived through depression as well. So his expectation of what a good life was dramatically different to what Robin's was. And so Robin went out and he played rugby and he busted his arm. Like, he fractured his radius. And his boss said, "Oh, right, well, you better go to the hospital and get that looked at." And so he went to the hospital and got it looked at, and they put it in a cast. And he said, "Right, good. So you'll be back on the farm doing PDs or doing surgeries. Just make sure you put a glove over it." So he literally had 2 days off after breaking his arm. And his boss's expectation was he'd get back to work. And his boss thought he was a lily-livered lightweight for having 2 days off. His boss would have expected him to have one. And in that moment, it laid bare clear there's just a generational thing going on. And there's no point fighting against that, because you are not going to change the habits of a generation. Good luck trying that, old chestnut. So our honest awareness indicator needs to reset a little bit. It needs to recalibrate and say, if you find yourself saying, they're all lightweights, they can't handle it, they're not the same, they're not as tough as when we graduated, let me tell you, the generation before that was saying the exact same thing about you. Okay? And so times have changed. Like, I think we have to bear in mind that the cognitive load, the amount of knowledge and data that these guys have to process, the way they're being taught, the influence of digital technology is a blessing and a curse. Like, when I screwed up, and I bet when you screwed up as a veterinarian, if it was really bad, it was never good. You always had an upset client. That's not changed, but it was between you, the boss, and the upset client. And if you were really unlucky, the local newspaper. If these guys screw up, it's across social media. It's potentially across review sites. There is a government website where you can petition here in the UK. One practice has about 45,000 signatures to have it closed down because one client posted her version of events and asked for support to close this practice down. And of course, in the Facebook social environment we're now in, 45,000 other reactive people thought that was a good idea based on 3 sentences of her opinion. That's just the environment we live in. No wonder they're a little bit intimidated and scared, okay? I probably would be too. All right, so let's talk about solving this problem. And to solve it, I think what we need to do is just build a little avatar of who these people are and really learn a little bit more about them. Okay, so I want to share some data with you now, if I can, from 3 surveys, and I'll pull out some little points that were made in those surveys if that's useful to you. So the first one, and a lot of this data comes from the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons here in the UK, and they did a survey of recent graduates in 2013. And one of the scary figures or trends in that was that over the time period that they were asking, there was a trend towards graduates leaving their job more quickly within the first 12 weeks that spiked in 2013 with 40% of graduates in that year. It's clearly a bad year for some reason, but 40% of graduates in that particular year left their jobs within 12 weeks of accepting an offer. Now, I think there may be a data challenge there, but the trend was going from something like 8 or 9% headed towards 20, 25%. That is a recruitment disaster for you. Not only, and you know, I estimate that it costs roughly, if you do an induction program properly, in terms of time spent recruiting, writing your job advert, posting your advert, doing your induction campaign, where you bring them in and teach them everything they need to know, that's about £10,000 worth of investment, you know, so $16,000 worth. Just blown up in smoke if somebody leaves that quickly. Like, that's disaster country, okay? And so then I did a little survey of graduates in my network as well. And one of the questions I asked them was about imposter syndrome. And 75% of them said they suffer from feeling that they're not good enough, otherwise known as imposter syndrome. 75% of them come out into the world feeling they're not good enough. Now, that's in its own right, it's not a problem, but if that persists because they don't get the support they need, that then becomes a big problem because their self-esteem starts to become trashed. And so that's a problem. That's a number we need to be watching closely, okay? And then according to the 2015 Vet Future survey of recent graduates, that almost half feel like their working life has not met their expectations, okay? Now, these are numbers that are not sustainable for us in practice. If we have people shifting job that quickly, if we have half of them not have it with a job that doesn't meet their expectations, then we have a very unhappy workforce. We have to do something about that, okay? Now, let's look at some of the reasons for that dissatisfaction. So if we look at the big numbers there, you can see the biggest of them, I did not receive enough professional support from my employer and colleagues, okay? Next one down, I did not receive enough emotional or social support from our employers or colleagues, okay? And the next one down, location, followed by money. Okay, so money's not the top list. Money's a little higher up the list than we might have expected. Now, they actually then did the percentage of people, or the most important reasons, and the one that got the highest votes and was miles ahead, like 80-20 ahead of everything else, was I did not receive enough professional support from my employers or colleagues. And then the next lowest one was emotional support. So what these guys want is to know that we have their back, whether it's about a clinical matter or emotional matter, and we need to make sure they don't get isolated. That's the social support. They go out of university, they lose their social networks, they're traveling to parts of the country where maybe they have nobody, particularly in Australia when it's such a big land, that can be an acute thing that they're sensing and suffering, okay? So that's interesting. Now, these are quotes taken from a very active, very heated discussion on Facebook that was on a group called Vets Stay, Go and Diversify, which is a scary title for a group in its first instance, because it shows you that there are people very unhappy. This group here in the UK has thousands of members, and let me tell you, the stay is not the predominant topic of discussion. The go or the diversify is the one everybody's talking about, okay? So being intellectually stimulated is nice. And a lack of that is one of the reasons I left. But I enjoyed the client interaction. Okay, so this person sounds like they were just bored. The lack of experienced vets to staff practices has been present for at least the last decade, is having the knock-on effect that young grads recruited into roles should have been filled by far more experienced vets. So they were chucking them in the deep end and we're not supporting them. Okay, so then the knock-on effect, new grads don't receive enough support, so they struggle to progress and develop new skills. Okay. So practicing vet, a little disillusioned by the job at times, I'd say a bit of training and looking after our mental health and managing stress would be great before throwing into practice. And then the last one, I graduated 7 years ago and can't remember any teaching on the impact this job can have on our mental health. Okay. So those of us that are of a vintage, well, I'm 1998, but let's say that and earlier, and particularly earlier still, like probably pre sort of 90, the mental impact, like if you've had a great time through your career, then, bully for you. But actually we know that in our profession, a lot of us aren't having a great time. A lot of us are suffering from mental stress. We're struggling. We know that regardless of age. But we also know students now are starting to break whilst they're at university. And that's kind of scary. Okay, so there's a problem there. So that's a little bit about what's going on. Like that's a little bit of understanding of who these people are. What can we do to sort of understand them and better support them? So here's a little bit of human needs psychology. Okay, these are the 6 fundamental things that we all need in our lives in order to be happy. If we've got these boxes are getting ticked, then we are happy bunnies. Okay, and this is taken from various sort of sources you can recognize. I'm sure Maslow in here. But let's run through these. Let's run through these needs. So we need to have certainty. And certainty comes in a couple of different ways. So it comes in the form of knowing we can put food on our table. We can provide a roof over the heads for our families, and we can have the things that we want to have in life, okay? But it also means we need certainty that we can do the job, like certainty that we've got this covered. The next one down is variety. So it's slightly at odds with certainty, but it's the opposite, really. We need to know that there's something different happening in our life. And again, we have the opportunity to change that up if we need to. Taking holiday is a good example. Being able to choose your clothes, your hair color, whether you wear a beard or not. These are all examples of variety. But it's the key thing here is that you are in control of that variety. Okay. Next one down is we need to be able to feel like we're significant. And we add value, we have significance to the world around us. We need to feel connection. Actually, we need to feel love as human beings. If we can't have love, we'll take connection. We need to be growing, mastering our craft, getting better at what we do. And we need to feel like we're contributing to a purpose greater than ourselves, okay? Now, let's look at veterinary medicine and through this lens, and should we be able to score highly and keep our people happy? Well, can we provide certainty? Heck yeah. Like, this is one of the most stable industries around. It provides a secure salary. It's one of the industries banks are happy to invest in because it's stable and it's recession proof. We should be able to provide certainty. Can we provide variety? Absolutely. Every 10 or 15 minutes, a new case walks through the door. And a new person on the end of that lead or the end of that cab basket also walks through the door. So there's enormous possibility for variety. Significance, we got doctor in front of our name. Like, what more significance can you need? We should score super highly there. Connection and love, for me, there are 3 opportunities here. We can feel connection to our patients. We can feel connection to our peers. We can feel connection to the people on the other side, our clients. Only if we know how to do that, right? Growth, like, there's abundant opportunities for growth. Like, continuing education is inbuilt. It's hardwired into what we're doing. And finally, contribution to a purpose greater than ourselves. What greater purpose could there possibly be than the preservation, extension of a life that is not your own? Like, that's pretty much a definition of purpose in my book. So we should be scoring 10s out of 10s in all of these factors. We should have the happiest workforce ever. So how come we don't? Like, what's really going on here? Let's look at these again. Certainty. Okay, yes, we come out and we give them a salary, but actually here in the UK, that salary has eroded by about 20% since I graduated compared to what it used to be. So it doesn't provide you as much security as it used to. Remember, certainty comes in the form of knowing that you're able to do the job or the things you're here to do. And as a graduate, you have a massive hole in that area. In fact, you're pretty certain you're going to get sued within 5 seconds of getting out there. So you start with very low certainty. And so improving your certainty, focusing on certain things and getting better at those things is the pathway to improved certainty, mastery. Okay, but of course, people have imposter syndrome. If you have imposter syndrome, you don't deal with that, then your certainty score is going to be very low. What about variety that we control? Well, actually, a lot of graduates are overwhelmed. You know that, yes, there's new things walking through the door all the time, and that's great once you learn how to do that. But that's stressful and overwhelming until you know how to do that if you don't have support, if you can't control that in some way. So there's a lack of control that impacts our variety score. Significance, well, great, you got the doctor, but as soon as you go out into the world and you don't have the answers, then pretty soon that imposter syndrome and your esteem can start taking a battering, so you don't feel so significant. Connection, well, again, we're putting graduates in towns and locations where maybe they don't have great social networks. We are not teaching them how to connect to human beings around them at university. And Robert, here's very much where I think we do have a problem at universities. We're hiring people we're recruiting people into universities based on high IQ that does not correlate with high EQ. In fact, if anything, it correlates in an inverse fashion. The smarter people seem to have a harder time connecting with people. Okay, growth. Yes, there's abundant opportunity for growth there, but it can be overwhelming. There's just so many opportunities for growth. So we need to be able to channel that for people. And then contribution. Well, that will come. But if you don't feel like you're getting case responsibility, or if you're getting case responsibility and you feel like you're doing a bad job, you will not feel you will be making a great contribution in life. Okay, so there's the problem laid bare, and I think there's really, this is sort of the answer. This is the antidote as to how we help these people better, because the one word that really shines out from this is they need support. This is why they need support. They need to have certainty that they can do their job. So how do we help them do that? We guide them. We show them how to master one thing at a time. Get good at desexing animals before you take on bigger surgery. Give them a learning pathway so they know, okay, when you've achieved this number of desexings and we're happy with that standard, we're going to let you loose on this thing. Teach them dentistry. Have them focus on a skill set and an area to acquire skills in that first every 3 months till they're at a level where they've got this, and watch their self-esteem grow. I had a brilliant young vet work for me in Australia, and she was very, very nervous at the start. She was very tentative, and she started out learning very, very slowly. And for a while there, I was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work out so well. And I was concerned that I wasn't able to switch the light bulb on for her. And in the end, what we did was we sent her on a dental course externally. And in that moment, she learned something and I learned something. When she went on the course, she was on the course with people who were many years graduated. And of course, she'd been working with us, and dentistry was our area of special interest. So we taught her dentistry really well. What she needed to see was how much better she was than people who've been doing it for years. And the fact that she'd been exposed to dental x-rays and she could make decisions. And in fact, she was so much better that the dental instructor pulled her off and put her on her own table and gave her one-to-one tuition. She came back from that course and she didn't look back. Not because she suddenly knew how to do everything, but because she suddenly believed in her own ability. Like, her certainty that she could do it spiked. And of course, that improved her sense of self-worth, her significance. And that fed into her ability to connect with clients. She felt, her growth numbers spiked up. That one class, we couldn't have spent better money if we'd have tried. And she turned out to be the best new graduate I ever hired. And she, just went on and is continuing to go on and absolutely rock it. Okay, so we need to build in systems that allow them better support, better mentoring. Okay, so these are the 3 areas that I think we need to work on to keep graduates. And by the way, it's not just graduates, just to keep vets happy in general. You can have a 5-year qualified vet, you bring them in and you suck as a leader, you're going to burn them out. They're going to leave your practice pretty quickly, okay? And even a 5-year vet, they've still got stuff to learn. They still need a structure. They still need support. Okay. So these are the 3 areas. Now, I'm not going to talk about environment. That's not my wheelhouse. That's basically how you build your business, the workflows, the equipment you have, the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it smells. There's other people on this planet who can be better to talk to you about that than I. But we'll touch on leadership, and then these guys need structure. I mean, a learning structure, a support structure, a mentoring structure. Okay. So let's just briefly touch on leadership now. All right. And we know, like we can distill leadership down into certain actions, certain steps, that if you start building these things into your game, you're going to become a better leader. It's not rocket science. Like leadership is one of those nebulous terms that we talk about leadership, but actually it's very hard to get a working definition on it. And that's for the last 5 years what I've focused on heavily, is working out, okay, how do we systematize becoming a good leader? None of this, some people are born good leaders and others are created. Like, that's all BS. People who are born good leaders can just talk loudly. You know, they're outgoing, they have bigger egos, or they're extroverted. That does not equate to being a good leader. That just equates to being noisy. There are things that, you know, being noisy and being able to do these things, then of course you can be a great leader. Okay, but introverted people can be amazing leaders too. All right. So here's just 6. There's a whole lot of things, and I do 2 separate hours and whole day classes on leadership. So I'm trying to give you something that is actionable and useful for you for just now. If you want to be a good leader, and you want to have an engaged team, like focus on these 6 areas and you will improve your abilities as a leadership. Okay, so number 1, set clear expectations. If your team don't have a clear idea of what's expected of them in terms of output, so clinical output, clinical standards, the way you expect them to do things, and also how you expect those things to get done. So they need to know what's expected of them and what behaviors are okay and are fostered and supported in your practice. You need to give them those clear expectations. So in my practices, I've always had objectives mapped out for every position and make it clear what that job is all about and how we're going to measure performance. And also a global behavior standards document that distills, really it's like the 10 commandments according to the practice, and says, look, you know, in this situation, here's the behavior we expect you to try and demonstrate. Okay. And so one of them, for example, in the behaviors is be nice. Okay. Even like the actual behavior statement says, be nice. All animals and people deserve our respect, in brackets, even spiders, which was put in there for my head nurse in Australia, who did not like spiders at all. Understandable in Australia. So it was be nice to all people and animals, even spiders deserve our respect. And they deserve it even on days where we don't feel like being nice. Because there's you can't say to people, come in skipping and happy and joyous to work, because they've got stuff going on. But you can say, look, even if you've got stuff going on, like, understand that, and you can talk to us about that stuff, but it doesn't mean you can come take it out on other people. Okay, so it's just about setting clear expectations, and if they're documented, then you can manage them. You can say to somebody, look, let's have a chat about what went on there, because that's not our behavior standard and it's not the way you normally behave. So can we talk about that? And it doesn't have to be a harsh or a challenging conversation. It's just a chat that steers people onto the straight and narrow. Good leaders have those conversations, okay? Number 2, give them quality training. Okay, so that does not mean you have to burst the banks on continuing education and spend $6,000 on continuing education. It just means you're a skilled practitioner, or you have skilled practitioners within your team. Set up the opportunities so that knowledge can be shared and be seeded around the practice. Okay, so give them quality training. And yes, do find good continuing education courses that are well aligned with what you need to achieve as a practice. Okay, support their mastery, and that means mentoring. Okay, it means facilitating them on the journey toward achieving greatness, one milestone at a time. Okay, so I'm not a fan of just willy-nilly spending continuing education budgets without knowing why we're doing it. Like, I had a £20,000 education budget in my practice in London before I came to Australia. And I swear to God, I don't know if we spent one penny of that usefully. because people got to choose their continuing education, and they looked at brochures and they just thought what might be good for them. But there wasn't a joined up plan of, okay, this is the vet I am, this is the vet I want to be, or this is the vet the practice needs me to be. So what are the milestones along that way? Okay. And my career changed when I started focusing on one thing at a time. So I focused on dentistry and got really good at that. And so what do you mean by support mastery? Well, don't just go on a CE course. Help them find a mentor internally or externally. Get them doing some online training. Get them hanging out with a specialist so they learn the tips and the tricks. Get them buying books that help their learning and growth, and get them doing the caseload that allows their mastery to develop. That's what supporting mastery is. Okay. Number 4, once they start on that journey and they've progressed past the point of being frighteningly dangerous at their new technique, and give them autonomy to learn. The last podcast guest I had on was Gerardo Poli, and he had this great phrase. He's up in Brisbane, lovely guy. And he had this great phrase, and he said, look, in order to let your team grow, you've got to make space for them. And I use the analogy of the plant pot. Like once somebody's reached a certain size, you need to pick them up and move them in a bigger plant pot. And they rattle around and they're scary, so you have to support them for a bit. Once their roots start to take down, and once they know how to work the ultrasound scanner, or how to hold the scalpel, or how to tie off a bleeder, let them do it. Don't squash them. And as they get better, that moves straight into number 5, recognize them. Okay, there is no substitute for catching somebody in the act of doing something right, or doing something well, or progressing. And there's nothing you're going to say as a boss that's going to make people stand on their tiptoes, puff out their chest, and float around your practice than a conversation like, hey, Haley, can I just have a quick word? I saw you, let's say it's somebody on telephone, and they're answering the phone and say, look, I heard that call you just had with a client, and I've got to say, sounded like they were a bit upset, but the way you handled them and the way you used your language to turn that round, and it sounded like they were kind of happy on the outcome there. That was awesome. Great job. Do more of that. They're going to bounce around your practice and be super happy. That's the power of recognition. And of course, once they become more valuable to you, pay them more. You have the metrics, you have the practice management software, particularly with your vets, that's an easy call. And personally, I advocate having a skills matrix where you say, look, when somebody can achieve these skills and they're doing so autonomously, then they move into a bracket value that you should be paying them more money. And we all know the number that is, you pay them roughly a fifth of what they net you. So their revenue less the GST, you should be paying them roughly a fifth if they're in general practice. We all know that number. Okay, so that's kind of the magic number, but monitor that number and be proactive about paying them that. Don't wait for them to ask you for the raise. Make it clear when you're going to do that. If you give them that sort of pathway, that sort of support and training, you're never getting rid of those people. So be careful who you give that support to. Actually, if you give that even to your 20%ers, then maybe they'll move up to MES. But all those guys in that MES category, if you start doing this stuff for them, you are going to be a rock star. And guess what also starts happening after that point? Your third-party army starts talking about you. People start saying how good of a place it is to work because the boss there is amazing, because they grow, they develop, they get these opportunities. So guess what? Recruitment starts getting a little easier as well. You become an island of excellence, and that's where you want to be. Okay? So that's the leadership thing. I think it's only by understanding the psychology of people a little bit can we start thinking about how our daily actions or decisions impact our people. And of course, our people are our most important asset. So we have to work on them. And when we do that, everybody wins. Now, Robert, you're just there to take the wind out of my sails. Gave your new grad vet 4 unsolicited pay rises, and she still left. Well, Robert, what else was going on there? And if she stayed with you for 4 years, and I can't see the edge of the chat box there, so let me just move that across because I'm not sure how long she was with you for. But if she was with you, 2.5 years and she still left. Look, 2.5 years is double what you're expecting to get out of your graduates. Like if they're averaging staying with you for 15 months, then honestly, I don't necessarily think that you did a bad thing there. In fact, if you were a good boss and did those other things, chances are that person left and is out there advocating for you right now. So use that. If you had a good relationship with that person, get some testimonial, get them to send you a video, put it in your job adverts. Hopefully you did a good job with that person, and you can use that. You can create some recruitment judo to help you out there. Okay. All right. So I'm conscious of you guys' time, and so let's talk about some tools in your hands. So this is a great quote I always like. Always at my back, or about in my back, I always hear "Time's winged chariot hurrying near," and so I know the thing that's in everybody's heads right now, because I've been the practice manager, I've been the vet working like all the hours God sends, and I know the challenge. Like, it all sounds, you say, "Hey Dave, it sounds great to do all those things," and that's good in theory, but you know what happens? We just run out of time, and I don't get a chance to do it. So, or I scheduled the meeting to have the conversation, but in veterinary practice, whenever something goes haywire, like a team member doesn't show up or an emergency walks in, like, there's always that challenge. There's always that pressure on time whereby the emergency never loses, right? Like, we always do a good job for the animals, but we have to recognize there is a very big cost in doing that. Okay, and there is an argument for ring fencing this time, a very strong argument to say, nope, this is super, super important. And if we don't do these things right, we can expect to lose team members or not hold on to them for as long as we would like. Okay, so we have to make the time, and then sometimes you can do that yourself. And there are a number of programs. Like, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what VetX is and why I'm doing it. Just before we take questions, but it's important to get that support. Now, if it's not feasible for you, if it's just one of those things that, you don't have the time or you don't have the skills, like, because a lot of the time you need the skills to be a mentor. And also a lot of the time, if you're talking about soft skills training, like, a lot of the bosses I worked for were great clinical bosses, but they weren't brilliant leaders all of the time. I would think they were very good with clients, but when it came to managing people, they were challenging. Okay, and so that kind of thing's damaging. So VetX, let me tell you a little bit about VetX and why I set it up. So the graduate programs I was running in Australia, and I work with I've set graduate programs up in the UK, and I'm delivering one in India right now. They make a big difference, and your graduates will they engage in that. They are absolute sponges. They want to learn. They want to be supported. They want to remain connected within a community. And so what I wanted to do with VetX was provide practices with a way of delivering that, effectively outsourcing some of the mentoring burden that's on you. And so the three words there are support, growth, and connection. So VetX, we do three things. We train them. Often it's in non-clinical skills training. So we'll teach them how to be a rock star in the exam room. And that does not mean sell. It just means, how do you have persuasion conversations with clients so they take the actions that you as practice owners and managers want your vets to take. Okay, we're not here to performance manage them. We're not here to set your standards of care. We're here to teach them the principles that, when they learn your standards of care, mean they are more productive in the exam room. So that's some of the things we teach them. We teach them how to deal with their imposter syndrome and to focus on mastery. We teach them time management skills. The Tetris game, you see graduates all the time that they do things in a linear fashion. They haven't really worked out how to play the game of Tetris yet. So we have a great webinar on how to play Tetris in veterinary practice, and get a heck of a lot more done, and not be going home late, and not be doing your notes from home, and not be getting any lunch, and all of the things that burn graduates out. So we focus on content like that. We've got guest lecturers who talk about dentistry, and pragmatically how you should go about thinking about it, how you should go about communicating it. We talk about end-of-life care and euthanasia, topics that veterinary schools don't communicate very well, and they're big opportunity areas to make a difference in your practice. We talk about money, okay, because vets are all allergic to money. So we talk about, okay, how do you go about talking to clients about it? And once you've made some of it, what do you do with that money to be a bit smarter? Well, like, I don't want people in my community to just earn a pittance all their lives and not work out how to invest money and how to have a pension fund at the end of it. And people don't get this sort of financial advice. So we'll pull financial advisors into the class and have content area specialists talking about all of these life skills. It's really a life skills training class adapted to veterinary medicine. So that happens once a month. And then every staggered once a month apart from that, every 2 weeks, we have a mentoring session. And that's based on a Facebook group. So it's a closed Facebook group, safe area. As bosses, you guys don't get in. But your graduates can talk about anything in there, okay? And they all know, like, this isn't stuff that gets shared outside of the group. And we choose the hot button topics or the things that people are really struggling with, and they will get online with their mentor, and we'll be able to dissect those problems, unpack them. So, for example, we had a wonderful talk on end-of-life care by an end-of-life care specialist from the US last month in the Europe-US group that's running at the minute. Great talk, everyone loved it. And then the mentoring sessions 2 weeks later, everybody wanted to talk about the tough conversations that they have with clients when they're animals that either aren't ready to be euthed, and people want it done, and how they can go about that and what their legalities are, or animals that really are ready to be euthed and clients aren't ready to go on that journey just yet. So we were able to teach them the right phrases to avoid guilt in clients, because we know that 20% of animals that are euthanized in a practice, 20% of those clients will not come back to your practice because they feel guilt, they feel pain associated with the building, and that's avoidable if you use the right language, if you coach those clients in the right way. So we teach them those skills. So it benefits them in their immediate interactions with clients, but it benefits you as practice owners because you are going to retain more business. You're going to generate more business. So I've got my eye on, I'm a vet. I've been a vet for 20 years. So I know what these graduates are going through. And I've hired graduates for the last decade of my career as a manager. So I've never not been working with graduates, but I know as the business owner what you need as well. And I've tried to put a course together that addresses both people's needs, okay? So we give them that support that allows them to grow. And of course, within the community, they then are connected to a peer network that allows them, even if they're in a remote or rural place, to have something familiar. Somewhere outside of the practice, they can get support. And I was one girl in our group in the UK who was having a difficult time with her boss. And so we unpacked this conversation. And there's no doubt in my mind she was thinking about leaving her practice. And had that been an abusive thing that was happening in her practice, I would not have tried to stop her. But when she was describing the problem, it was clear the problem was with her. And the problem she was running from, she couldn't run from. She had needed to address the issue that was internal. So we did some live coaching on that and completely turned around her mindset. And now she's happy again and stable. So, we're able to catch those things within the group as well and help maintain that relationship with the practice. And if we feel somebody is really wobbling, then we can give you a heads up as well. Because what we want this class to be about is helping you to attract the talent, to compete with the corporates, but also then retain the talent and make sure that talent gets better faster, that they climb and meet those 6 human needs. Like, we can get their certainty scores up. We can allow them to be able to be more in control of the variety, that they build their self-esteem, feel significance, that we give them connection. Not giving them love necessarily, but we give them connection. And of course, we grow. We're teaching them, so they're growing. If all of those things are happening, then they get the ability to contribute to the purpose better than themselves. The theory says they should hang around longer because of that investment. Okay, so that's VetX. All right, we're going to lift the burden from you. We're giving them modern teaching from people who are in the cutting edge in their fields. I deliver some of that training, but we will have tutors from in Australia who are at the top end of their game. People in the emergency field will be talking. Gerardo's going to do a talk for us on emergency medicine and how that equates in general practice and decision making, for example. We'll have end-of-life care conversations. We'll have dentistry. All of these things being covered in there. So practical skills are always actionable, and the improvement should be profitable. Like, I want to be able to look you in the eye I'm not looking at you now, I'm looking at a computer screen, so that's a dumb thing to say. But and actually what I want to hear back from you as somebody who puts a vet into this program is that that person was happier and they were more profitable, that you could tangibly see a difference in that person because they were in that program, okay? So we'll give them that growth opportunity, the connection and learning environment. And so you can compete with your corporate rivals. You can say, look, we have a training program, a mentoring scheme in VetX that is, by the way, accredited with the IVA for 18 structured learning points and another 18 unstructured. So it meets their CE needs in one fell swoop. And then you retain them, because that's the measure of success for this class, is that you get graduates and we reduce your recruitment time, and then you retain the graduates who are actually profitable and fun to work with because of what we're teaching them. That's what good looks like for VetX, and that's what we're shooting for, okay? And just to give you some, this is sort of the impact. So I track these things. I'm a bit of a data nerd. And so this is a graph. The red arrow is pre-intervention, shall we call it, pre-support. And so this is a practice where the graduates are not doing badly, I don't think. Like, they're doing pretty average numbers. So the green line is sort of what the average for this practice was, and the blue line is what the graduate's achieving. But the red line is where they move into a support system, okay, a mentoring system, and look at the impact on what happens with their bloods, okay. Similarly with their x-rays, there's a little spike in x-ray there. Statistical significance in the x-ray, I would think, is quite dubious. Cytology, well, that's not dubious, that's pretty clear. Then their average transaction value, there's a big difference in there. Now, look along at 2017 week 10, look what happens there, it bumps down. That is the impact of not taking holidays, okay? That's somebody who then falls in a heap because they've just not taken holidays, and you can just see that reflected in their numbers. So that's a little bonus assignment aside for you there. Make sure your guys are taking holidays every 3 months, all right? So if you want to build a better future in independent practice for your people, for your practice and for our profession, I'm not against corporate medicine per se, but I definitely swing for the wee guys, okay? That's my background. That's what I like doing. And I think that's where a lot of the soul of veterinary medicine is. I don't think that's ever going to go away completely, but we definitely need tools to support better. That's what VetX is for. Okay, now cost. Okay, so if you are outside of IVA, then there's a one-time payment for a graduate of $995, or 12 monthly payments, staggered monthly of £99 a month. Sorry, that's not in dollars, but I'm based in the UK and it gets too complex to do systems in lots of different currencies. But credit card wise and exchange rate wise, you can be guaranteed the pound is doing bad things because of Brexit, and so the rates are favorable just now for you. If you are an IVA member, then Corey has put the thumb screws on me, and so we've negotiated a 25% off deal if you are an IVA member. That comes because you're part of a collective buying group, and that's a better deal than you will get anywhere else right now. So if you are a member of IVA, there's a promo code that you will get from Corey and his team. So you must ask them for that. And that's what I got for you. So it's not, we don't have to leave this to chance. We mustn't leave it to chance. If we get the right structure, the right delivery, and work on our leadership, then you will be absolutely just fine. Okay. So I'll leave you with this little quote, and then we can move into questions. So if you've got questions, start firing them in the box. We can't build the future for our youth, but we can build the youth for our future. I just love that quote as well. All right. That's what I got for you. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for staying on. I hope that was eye-opening at the very least. If you're sat there with a glass of beer or a glass of wine or a cup of tea in your hands, I hope it was a worthy way to spend your evening. So yeah, if you've got questions, please. I can see one here. Karen has asked, why are these young people so deficient in life skills? That is a really good question, okay? And there are some really good answers to that as well. Can they not talk to their parents? Communication. Like, I'll tell you what the answer to that is. And there are multiple inputs into that. Number one, yeah, like parenting skills are not awesome. Okay, like, so if we want to, look, it's nice and easy to blame the next generation, but as parents of the next generation, that's a lot of the place where it's coming from. So helicopter parenting techniques, insulating people from failure is one of the biggest problems that's out there. Okay, we do it in schools, we do it in parenting techniques. Like anytime something happens, like we jump in the swing park or the playground to intervene whenever kids are having some form of conflict. And it's one of the worst things we can do. Like, sure, if it's getting to fisticuffs, then that needs to stop. But the way that you work out conflicts and the way you work out and you build resilience is to go through challenging situations and get through the other side and go, so the world didn't fall into my head. So the roof didn't cave in. Oh, that's cool. I learned something there. We've been starving our children of these opportunities over the last 10 or 20 years. These devices are horribly toxic as well. Horribly toxic. And the ability, like, there's two things happening there. Number one, there's an instant gratification. Like, we're online and we expect to get everything now. And our graduates have that expectation. It's like millennials have that expectation about everything. I expect to be good now. I've gotten my degree, therefore I'm awesome. And of course, then they hit real life and then they fail and they work out, I'm not awesome. Their level of unconscious incompetence is insane. And it's our jobs to catch them when they fall and to say, okay, so that didn't work out so well. So what are we going to do next? And to teach them, and I'm sorry that we have to do this, but we do. I had a coaching conversation with a graduate yesterday and the question in the coaching conversation was, how do I switch off after work? And I said, okay, well, give me an example of a time when you're not switching off. And she talked about a case where an animal had been euthanized, that she'd seen had been euthanized a couple of days later. And so I said, okay, tell me about the case. And so she told me about the case. And it was an older animal that had multiple pathologies. It had hypothyroidism, had renal compromise, had a cat bite abscess, and the presenting sign was it was depressed, lethargic. And it had a massive festering cat bite abscess. So she did a good job. She treated the cat bite abscess. She made an assessment on the animal. And so she treated it. And the animal went home. Came in the next day. We said, look, look if the cat's not improving, come in the next day. So that's what happened. And then another vet saw that animal and wasn't better, was a little more depressed, and now picked up another issue. Thought, okay, we better take a chest x-ray. And it turns out actually the cat had two, possibly two more comorbidities occurring. So this is an old animal that's got everything going on. And it may be that this animal's just at the end of its life. So some more treatment was administered, a discussion was had with the client was all on board with everything, and arrangements were made with an emergency service to handle things if things didn't improve, which they did not improve. And the cat was in the end euthanized. So this graduate then is beating themselves senseless about what went on and what they missed. And I said, so what emotions did you get? And she said, anxiety. And I said, okay, what else? And she said, guilt. And I went, okay, why were you anxious? And of course, she's anxious because she thinks she's going to get a client complaint, and then the board is going to strike her off, and she'll never be able to work again, and she won't be able to put food on her table, and her whole mission in the last 10 years to be a vet is going to be over and done. That's the ghost train she got on, okay? She catastrophizing, and she felt guilty because she felt like she didn't find the problem, and said, well, let's go back and let's rationally look at the facts here. Did she do a good physical exam? Yes, she did. Did she find problems that looked plausibly like they would be, that they fit with the clinical picture? Yes, she did. Did she dispense and administer a treatment that should have gotten the animal better? Yes, she did. Did she make arrangements for the client to come back. Should that not happen? Yes, she did. In other words, she did a great job. Yes, she missed 2 out of 5 comorbidities, but there's very few vets in the land would have picked him up on the first consult. Because, and actually, had you gone in doing masses of x-rays and scanning on that animal in the first instance, then you probably would have been guilty of over-servicing if that was your general approach. So all we had to do was teach her a different story. And the story we taught her wasn't that the client was going to be angry and feel like awful and complain to the college she was going to get struck off. The story was, so you were the first step in a care chain that caught the animal in 3 days running, did everything that was physically possible to do for it without over-servicing, and helped the animal, helped the owner, wasn't in our practice, was in a separate practice, helped the owner make a decision to end the animal's suffering, knowing they'd done everything possible, and therefore they won't live with the guilt. And she's like, oh, I never thought about it like that. And so I said, well, how's about, so then it's about, okay, rationalize, response, don't react. And then catch yourself. We're all going to feel emotion. Like, that's never going to go away. Even like I get complaints, like I feel anxious and I feel bad about that. Okay. But then you catch yourself and go, is that helping me? And then be careful of the story that these people, that we all do, that these individuals are then telling themselves, that extends the emotion into a story about themselves that is frankly likely to be bullshit and is not helping them. So by hot wiring that, then we help them. Now, should we have to do all of that? Like, are we trained clinical counselors and psychologists? Like, no, we're not. But if we want to manage these people, we have to understand these things are going on, okay? You don't have to understand a lot of that stuff, because that's what we teach them in VetX. And that's the area of skill set and interest that I have in working with these people. And that's the extra training that I've done over the years to learn these things. So yeah, it sucks that that's the way that generation is, but we're not going to change that. We have to teach them and show them better ways of doing things. They will build up the resilience with time. They're just starting further back. And this is a tough job, and it was always a tough job. And it's a super tough job when you're playing it out in the filtered up, life. Like, they see all of their colleagues doing things with a selfie filter on, and they think, oh my God, why am I not that good? Of course, all of life is selfied up, filtered rubbish on social media. And like, we don't like, nobody posts all the stuff they really screwed up on social. Like, this is me totally massacring a dog on smiley face, that doesn't get posted on social media. It's just like, this is me totally rocking whatever thing I was rocking. In my otherwise dull life that's like all of the rest of our lives. So we just need to help them understand these things and be understanding of these things ourselves, which is a mind shift for us as much as anything else. So, Karen, that's a very long answer to your question. I hope it gave you some insight. So Christine asks, can a new grad join you on their own? We had almost done 5th year through for work experience, job lined up after graduation of practice that didn't hire nurses. New graduates were cheaper and they could get more after our sharing. He's committed to his town. His wife has a job there. This sounds great for him. Yeah, Christine, anybody can join up. We will look after anybody. The fact is that, the price, I suspect, puts a lot of graduates off paying it out of their own pocket. But if they're committed, I'll say to graduates that I will improve their skills well enough that they'll be able to gain back 3 times that in the form of a pay raise, because their bosses will love them so much. So it's an investment. People who are willing to put their own hand in their pocket are the most welcome, because I know they'll be the most committed community members. I saw a comment from further up. Let me just scroll back. Christine, I think, is that you again? Christine says, this sounds like something I need rather than a new graduate, and I graduated in 91. Funny you should say that, Christine. We target 0 to 5 years. I had a lady in the UK email me and say, she's been a vet for 30 years. She's never had a boss that taught her any of this stuff, and she's sad about that. If there was space, would I let her in? But she didn't want to keep a new graduate out. And so, we max out at 50 graduates for a UK class in our year 1. We got a really nice number at 30, which allows us to look after our grads and give them good attention and get everything right. And so we had space, so I was delighted to offer her a place. And she is so committed to the community. It's wonderful. So I'm not advertising it to anyone beyond the VetX group, but if anyone has a burning need and wants to be in there, I think the other graduates would struggle if you're a boss. I am putting together a program like this for practice owners that will be slightly differently focused. So, you know, watch that space. And Christine, the other thing is think about coaching or mentoring, because I'm always happy to do that with people as well. So, all right. And someone else has asked, is there a discount for having 2 new graduates join? Maris, if you are in the IVA group, there wouldn't be a further discount on that, because it is a whopper of a discount in any case. If you're not a member of it, probably your best bet is to join. But if you're not a member or you're committed someplace else, your best discount is going to be through IVA. If you're not a member, then I would always look after you in some way, but you'll get your best discount if you go through IVA for sure. All right. Any other questions? Corey, did I miss anything? Are there any questions come through that I've not gotten to that other people had? I don't want. If you've got a question, fire it in just now.
There was a question there, Dave, from Debbie about, I think she missed the first part of the webinar and just want to know whether she can rewatch it. So short answer to that is yes, we are recording it. So we will be able to send out a link for you to be able to log back in and watch that. So I've noted that down, but we'll send that link to everyone that was on the call tonight, so you can rewatch that at your leisure.
There was one question there from Alistair. He said, let's get the vet, then VetX. What I'm very happy for you to do is you can use the VetX logo. If you want a copy of the VetX logo in a job advert, you're more than welcome to use that. And tell them that they're going to be in a grad program. Obviously, only do that if you're going to do it, because that might be, misrepresenting something if you don't. But the purpose of this is to be able to give you a tool to recruit better, and to be able to compete. And so we have a lot of content on the website. So it's drdavenicol.com/VetX, and we've got video testimonials up on there from the people who are in the class just now. So this is a tool to help you, recruit first of all, and then to retain a profitable, happy member of your team after that. So by all means, you can do that with my blessing. If you do want the logo, Corey, I'll send you guys a copy of the logo, and remember they're going to pick up 36 points for their CE as well for the year, so they've kind of got that covered off. And I'll guarantee you as well, and I'll tell you this now, okay, I'll just be straight with everybody upset. I intend making them do well enough that they can come to you and ask for clinical CE on top. But only because they're generating more revenue and they're doing a good job and they're completely engaged members of your team. That's my challenge. That's the objective we set ourselves in VetX, is to be able to make these people good enough that you want to invest more in them. Because I've always thought in my practices it's daft having a minimum, maximum CE spend, because that if somebody's absolutely eating that up and is doing a great job, why would you not keep investing in them? It's kind of crazy. So there you go. That is what I got.
All right. I think we might have got through those questions. So Dave, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your energy tonight. It's been a terrific session, and we didn't lose anyone through the whole session, so that's always a good thing. So there you go. Well done.
Happy days. Thank you.
So it's nearly 9 o'clock our time, so in the evening. So that's great. So everyone's certainly well engaged, and there's no question the topic is very hot and very real for everyone. So we're discussing before the start of the meeting today about I guess the challenges of all the the practice owners and so on to engage with their new grads and the new staff, and how I guess my terminology was they get sucked into the vortex of the business, and and get caught in just the day-to-day running of their business, as opposed to being able to work on their business and do these sort of things as much as they know they need to and would like to. Just the sheer demand of the business just doesn't always allow it. So I guess potentially having an option to support that in the background and offer that is, I think, will be tremendous. So thank you to everyone for attending tonight. We appreciate your time, and as I said, we will send out the links to everyone that was on the session tonight, so you can watch it again. If you have any more questions about the evenings, then certainly reach out to either Dave directly or myself, and we'll certainly be in contact and to talk to you further about it. So thank you again, and thanks, Dave. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll enjoy the rest of our evening, and
thank you.
Hopefully we'll talk all again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks for your evening.